For many, the first week of January represents the promise of a new year, a beginning. For others, it is the end, a culmination of a season worth of ecstasy and anguish. But the goal is clear. One game, one victory, one national championship. In the early 1960s, Joe Namath, Alabama's quarterback, seemed as much made for movie stardom as for football.
You know, Alabama's a real conservative state, and old farm boys back in that days with the crew cuts, and he had this kind of swarthy, handsome movie star look, and he was different, to say the least.
We got this skinny kid from Beaver Falls as our quarterback, and obvious real quick that he was going to be exceptional.
When he came to Alabama, he could run, he could jump, dunk a basketball. See, and that's unheard of really back in those times. So he was just a great athlete.
Namath had a turbulent career at Alabama. Paul Bear Bryant suspended his star quarterback for the final 2 games of his junior season.
I think he was riding down the road by the sorority row, and they rode up on the lawn of one of the sorority houses, and they had just got through sodding that lawn. That's probably where he got in trouble, and Coach Bryant kind of disciplined for that.
Back the following season as a senior starter, Namath tore up his knee in the 4th game of the season. His Alabama career appeared to be in jeopardy. Despite losing Namath, Alabama rolled to a perfect 10-0 season. The Crimson Tide accepted a bid to play Texas in the Orange Bowl on New Year's 1965. The first game ever to be played and televised at night.
NBC's decision to air the 1965 Orange Bowl game in prime time was a milestone in sports television history. It predated the Super Bowl, and in fact, there hadn't even been a nighttime World Series baseball game up to that time.
And they had a record audience and a record crowd. Fortunately, they picked maybe one of the greatest matchups in history.
You had Bear Bryant on one sideline and Darrell Royal on the other, and here they were competing in a classic, which that game truly was.
Namath's knee was so heavily taped, he was deemed immobile and unready to play.
He always prepared to play, but I don't think he really expected to play. If something happened, then he would go in and be ready to play.
Hi, everyone, and a very pleasant welcome to Miami for the playing of the 31st Orange Bowl game. The Crimson Tide of Paul Bear Bryant, the #1 college team in the land, against Coach Darrell Royals, Texas Longhorns, the team that was #1 last year and #4 this season.
Steve Sloan, who finished the season at quarterback for Alabama, started the game.
And they started the reserve quarterback, and we were blitzing him with success, handling it real well.
Texas scored twice on Alabama in the first 20 minutes of play to take a 14-0 lead.
At the 30, the 20, the 10, and he's over!
Alabama was a couple of touchdowns behind and looking woeful.
Looking to throw, great protection. Has a man, caught right at the 15, the 10, the 5, into the end zone!
Hoping to rally the Tide in the second quarter, Bear took a chance on his hobbled star.
Joe Namath, the great quarterback of the University of Alabama.
Sometimes you bring in somebody else, you get a big lift. That gave the team a really big lift. Of course, if you can bring somebody in with that talent, you know, that it's nice to have a backup with that type of ability.
Namath entered the game. He drove the Crimson Tide 87 yards in 14 plays for a touchdown that cut the Longhorns' lead in half.
Every time we'd blitz, he'd dump it to somebody. We'd blitz again, he'd dump it to somebody. It looked like they were going to score every damn play.
Namath put the Tide in motion. In the third quarter, he rifled a 20-yard touchdown pass to flanker Ray Perkins, cutting the Longhorns' lead to 21-14.
I think we were ready to and confident until the last bell rung that we were going to pull it out.
Down by 4 in the fourth quarter, Namath connected on a series of passes and drove his team to the 6-yard line for 1st and goal. Fullback Steve Bowman hit the Texas line 3 straight times.
Doesn't look like he made it. A 4th down and a yard to go.
Joe came to the sideline to find out what play we wanted to run, and nobody had a real good answer. And then finally, he said, well, I'll just take it in.
Joe Namath is trying the quarterback sneak. Did he get it over there? No signal as yet. He's right in the goal line.
Texas had this great middle linebacker named Tommy Novus, and he anticipated what Joe was going to do, so as Joe began to take his vault over the line, Tommy was doing the same thing.
Our Texas man says no. Our Alabama man is nodding his head yes.
He wound up in the end zone and said at the time that one of the officials called it a touchdown, but the referee, quote, overruled.
There has been no signal. It is not a touchdown. Texas has that football on a brilliant goal line stand.
Well, it's very close. You know, it could have been called either way. There's no doubt about it, and I've told people that. I personally did not think his initial surge made it across. Joe was crawling on the elbows and stuff, but we feel like we stopped him.
We claim he missed it by about like that.
Namath's brilliant comeback had fallen short. But the 21-17 Texas upset win over Alabama will long be remembered as the night that both Joe Namath and the Orange Bowl hit the big time. In 1966, for the first time, the national championship was to be awarded after the playing of the bowl games. Bryant's Crimson Tide entered the day with little chance of winning the national crown, ranked behind 3 other teams in the AP poll.
Well, few people took notice of Bear Bryant's plan to stage a national championship game between Alabama and Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. The possibilities were just so unlikely.
Bear Bryant had been in the bowl business a long time, knew the ins and outs, and I think he had a great deal of say about who was going to play where and when.
Bear had convinced third-ranked Nebraska to accept the Orange Bowl bid to face his Crimson Tide. Bryant believed the 2 top teams in the nation, Michigan State and Arkansas, were beatable. In the unlikely event that they were both upset in their earlier games, the Orange Bowl would determine the national championship.
He wanted to play the top team that he could play in the bowl game. Always wanted to play the team that gave his team the best chance to be national champions.
New Year's Day 1966 might have been Bear Bryant's most dazzling display of bowl jockeying.
First up, the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. Second-ranked Arkansas against unranked LSU. The first surprise of the day. The Razorbacks were stunned 14-7. One piece of Bear's puzzle was in place.
So that means Nebraska moves up to number 2 and Alabama moves up to number 3. And then you had the Rose Bowl.
Number 1 Michigan State needed to win for a national championship. Only underdog UCLA stood in the way.
I mean, it was David and Goliath. That's how much better this team was than us. I mean, they thought they were going to clean our clock. I agreed with him. I did.
Meanwhile, back in Miami, hours before his kickoff, Bryant was preparing his squad for a Michigan State upset.
We got class, we're going to find it out. We got class, and I know we got it. And what we got to do, first place, our defense has got to go out there and take the ball.
I remember Coach Bryant saying something to the effect, hey, we're going to be in good position. We'll just play it out today. You know, let's see what happens.
What happened was improbable. UCLA scored 2 second-quarter touchdowns and held on for a shocking 14-12 victory. It was one of the biggest upsets in Rose Bowl history. Number 1 had fallen.
And all at once, Nebraska and Alabama are playing for the national title.
I went over to Bryant. He was typical Bryant with his hat down over his eyes, leaning against the goalpost. And he kind of gestured, and I went over and he put his arm around me and he said, he's looking out at Nebraska, he says, big, good-looking boys, my goodness, look how big they are and how fast. He says, we're going to beat the hell out of them.
As if by magic, Brian got the help he needed earlier in the day. Now at night, he had control. But the magician had one more trick.
And he just got me off to the side and he said that he wasn't going to tell anybody. He said he wasn't going to tell the coaches, he wasn't going to tell the players. He was just telling me that I could forget the structure that we normally call plays by. I could throw the ball anytime I wanted to, anywhere on the field.
With a secret offensive plan in place, Bryant wasted no time in dazzling the Cornhuskers with the unusual.
We started the game with a tackle-eligible screen. Very unusual play. You can't run that play now in college football.
Coach Bryant even told somebody, we can't win this game 3-0 or 10-6 and hope to come out of it with a national championship. We're going to have to be impressive.
Bryant unleashed a furious first-half passing attack that had Nebraska bewildered. Sloan shattered Orange Bowl passing records as he connected with flanker Ray Perkins, who caught 2 touchdown passes. Alabama blitzed Nebraska for a 24-7 halftime lead.
I think we came out and just showed them a game plan that we had not shown all year, or ever for that matter. You know, throwing the ball 35 times, you know, that's not Alabama.
By the end of the night, Alabama had racked up 518 yards of total offense against a stunned and ill-prepared Nebraska team. The unexpected offensive fireworks gave Alabama 39-28 win. The national championship was theirs.
I don't think everybody expected us to win the ball game, but we knew down deep that we were going to go out and win that football game.
Typical of Bryant, going to a bowl eventually would lead to something better for him. And the '66 Orange Bowl led to another national championship.
After taking over from Bob Devaney in 1973, Tom Osborne coached Nebraska to a number of outstanding seasons. But he was unable to lift the Cornhuskers back to the national title.
Coach Devaney came to Nebraska, made him a national par, won national titles in '70 and '71, took him to big bowl games every year. And Tom Osborne comes in, could not win the big ones.
What has happened to the Huskers after their winning seasons? In bowl games, they have lost and lost embarrassingly.
In 1983, after 2 consecutive seasons that ended in near misses at the national championship, Tom Osborne assembled an offensive juggernaut. Quarterback Turner Gill, running back Mike Rozier, and wide receiver Irving Fry.
They were exceptional. Basically rewrote the NCAA record book with what they accomplished, and of course all 3 of them legitimate Heisman candidates.
They were so dominant. They were the Muhammad Ali. They were the early Mike Tyson of college football at that time. They hadn't lost a game in almost 2 years, and nobody thought Nebraska was going to get beaten. Nobody.
The top-ranked Huskers would have a chance to prove their dominance in the Orange Bowl on New Year's Day, 1984. And Osborne would have a chance to attain the national championship trophy that had eluded him for over a decade. Standing in his way, Bernie Kosar and the hometown Miami Hurricanes.
That was a tough one as a fan. You know, if you sat back and said, God, we should play these guys anywhere else than playing them in their home place for the national championship.
I ask each one of them not to think about the fact that they were undefeated, not to think about the Outland Trophy winner, don't worry about the Heisman Trophy winner, but to study their men individually. We would find that they're human and that may not be as good as all their press clippings have made them out to be.
We knew there were going to be some things that they could do to maybe slow us down, but we always went into ball games thinking that we're going to score 35 to 40 points a game. And there was no way that we would ever thought in our mind that we would lose the football game.
Schellenberger and his Miami Hurricanes ready to take on one of the great teams in college football history, the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
From the beginning, it appeared that the home field advantage was overwhelming.
Hits back, Rozier.
Backs are split behind Kosar. Second and short, like a free play down the middle. Dennison, he scores! Touchdown pass, Glenn Dennison! With a minute and 8 left to play in the first quarter. Would you believe it? It is 16-0 Miami.
Early in the game, we got behind 17-0. And throughout the game, we just kind of clawed our way back, you know, and began to gain a little momentum.
On a trick play called the Fumble-Ruski, 270-pound guard Dean Steinkühler picked up an intentional fumble by Turner Gill and rumbled 19 yards for a touchdown.
Huskers fired up by the Fumble-Ruski.
But in the third quarter, Kosar's aerial precision led Miami to a 31-17 lead.
Touchdown, Miami!
Nebraska battled back to 31-24. And the Huskers had one last chance with less than 2 minutes left.
Fourth down is coming up for Nebraska. Well, they've won 22 straight games, 12-0 this season, ranked number 1 all year, but they're down by 7. Look at this play, Jeff Smith. Touchdown, Nebraska!
It was 31-30.
And what does Nebraska do?
Tom Osborne faced a career-defining decision. A tie assured him a national championship.
I have not seen the kicker come on the field, and I don't think he's coming on the field.
I always assumed that if a coach settled for a tie, they wouldn't make him the national champion, and our players, we'd had a great offensive team, and I knew they wouldn't be happy with settling for the tie.
There was no hesitation in Coach Osborne. A signal, giving 2 points, called the play, got my players there, looked them in the eyes and say, hey, keep believing, we will get it done.
This is for the national championship for Nebraska.
They had a defensive back who came off of Irving Fryer and made a great reaction and just got a fingertip on the ball. And that was it. And they win the game and the national championship, and we go home to Lincoln without it.
I know I don't regret him making that decision. I'd have been the other way around if he'd have, given the 1 point as far as the finger that's saying that let's go for 1. I'd have been dejected inside. I probably wouldn't have shown it outside per se, but I've been disappointed that we didn't go out and be 13-0. That was our goal, was 13-0 from the beginning of the season. He knew that, and so I'm glad he did give us an opportunity to go for 2.
You wanted to see him go for it because as a fan, you want to see one play. You want to see one play that wins or loses the game, and in this case, the national championship.
I cared about what the fans thought, and I would have liked to have had a national championship. But ultimately, I think it would have been a disappointment to the players, and it would have been a disappointment to me personally. So I really felt it was the thing we had to do, and probably would do it over again if I had to.
Notre Dame coach Ara Parseghian won the national championship in 1966, despite tying Michigan State. He decided to run out the clock late in the game rather than taking chances to win.
And it looks like that's all. Michigan State 10, Notre Dame 10.
Parseghian received considerable criticism from fans and the media, who felt the championship was tainted.
To this day, Ara probably regrets doing what he did. Other teams can run the clock out. Notre Dame's not supposed to. Notre Dame is not supposed to run out the clock.
Ara Parseghian brought his inexperienced but hungry third-ranked Irish to the Sugar Bowl in 1973. His opponent, Bear Bryant and top-ranked Alabama. The championship was at stake, and the game had all the markings of a fiery brawl.
It was the first time that Notre Dame and Alabama had played. It was the first time that Bear Bryant and I had coached against one another. It was the North against the South, the Baptist against the Catholics. I mean, highly potentially explosive.
We knew going in that if we won the game, we would be national champions. So it was a huge game for us to get motivated for, and it's scary to be under that much pressure as a 20, 21-year-old kid.
This is the dream match, the most important game of the year.
Notre Dame and Alabama. At Notre Dame, football is a religion. At Alabama, it's a way of life.
But Mother Nature had her own plans for the Sugar Bowl.
It had rained all day long, and it was cold rain.
In our pregame warm-up with my punter, Brian Doherty had come to me and he says, Coach, he said, this end zone slopes down to get the water to run off. So a punter was faced with almost an uphill lie, and that influenced me.
He didn't know it then, but Brian Doherty had made a discovery that would change Notre Dame history.
Best football game I've ever seen. Absolutely. Because there was some doubt about who was going to win the ball game from the very opening, and because Bear Bryant and Ara Parseghian matched wits.
The first time these two teams have met on the football field.
Inside handoff, touchdown Alabama.
They scored a touchdown, but then we came right back with a kickoff return. And from that point on, it just went down to the wire.
People are watching some football game here. We've said this many times during the course of the contest.
The game turned into a wide-open affair, with the lead changing hands 6 times.
Well conceived play and touchdown.
With less than 3 minutes remaining in the game and grasping to a 24-23 lead, the Irish were pinned against their own goal line.
Notre Dame ran a couple of plays, and I told Ara one time that you were running almost like the Michigan State game.
If Notre Dame could make the first down, Bama would not see the ball again.
Facing a 3rd down and 8, Parseghian recalled Doherty's pregame discovery that the end zone was treacherous.
Notre Dame was going into the wind and would have a hard time getting the ball out of there. Ara's outlining all the possibilities.
We were backed up in our own end zone where any bad thing that happened could have resulted in a safety.
And all we needed was a field goal. So the odds were with us that we could do that because we had moved it all game long.
We took out one of the split end, put in 2 tight ends, all the backfield in the back, making it look like we're going to run.
So this is it for Notre Dame.
3rd down. Clements coming out is a pass, and he's got his man.
Robin Weber, number 91, a sophomore from Dallas, Texas.
Give Tommy Clements all the credit in the world. We said at the very top of the show, he was a young man who was not afraid.
You know, Ara made the call, and I'm sure surprised a lot of people. We certainly surprised the Alabama defense.
They drop back, throw a pass, the tight end comes right in front of Alabama's bench. I could have reached out and tripped him. Well, this is the first time they had ever did that kind of a thing. It was a tremendous surprise.
Weber juggles the ball. He hasn't caught one pass the whole season. The ball's bouncing up and down. When I'm watching this, my heart came out. I said, my God, he almost dropped the ball.
Finally, Era Parsegian had brought the national championship trophy back to South Bend. It was the school's first since it returned to bowl play in 1970. It was also Era's first title since 1966.
People say the 66 was a little bit tainted because they ran out the clock. I think in the back of his mind that when he called that play, he was going to erase that memory, and in some ways he did.
You got to go out and win the ball game, and I respect him for doing that. It was a gutsy play, but it worked for him.
For the critics and fans alike, Parsegian's bold decision had been viewed as vindication. But for the Notre Dame coach, it was nothing more than the right call at the right time.
You never know how things are going to work out. It turned out that they bought the package. 2 tight ends were going to run it conservatively down there. That was a huge play.
I can't tell you how thrilled we are to be able to participate in the Sugar Bowl Classic and to be able to win the championship. We're thrilled. It was a great game for college football.
Four times from the 60s to the 90s, Penn State's Joe Paterno fielded unbeaten football teams that were not voted national champions. His teams were battling on the field and fighting for respect off of it.
I think being an Eastern Independent was tough. You know, we really didn't, particularly in the late 60s, there was not that kind of respect for Eastern football.
But now Blackledge is going to put it up on first down. He's going for the bundle. Garrity! Touchdown!
In 1983, Paterno's quest for the elusive first national championship was realized as he led the Lions to a Sugar Bowl win over Georgia. His team was near the top 4 years later. Penn State was matched up against the talent-laden Miami Hurricanes in the Fiesta Bowl. Paterno knew that for Penn State to gain respect, he would have to show that his workhorse team could beat Miami.
There was a perception that our football was somewhat inferior when we had to go play Miami, what Miami would do to us because we were playing in the East. It really bothered him. I think to go and do everything that you could do and do things the right way, I think it really bothered him.
Though the two were neighbors in the polls, the teams could not have been further apart in styles. A reflection of their coach, the Nittany Lions were understated. The Hurricanes were brash and arrogant. That image was immediately underscored when Miami stepped off the plane in Arizona clad in battle fatigues.
I think that Miami came in there with an idea that they could intimidate us.
Well, I don't know what they were trying to tell us. I mean, the fact is, for them to be in the Army, I mean, those guys in the Army, they would never fly. They're saying that they're going to war and that, I mean, this a bunch of nonsense.
The Miami practice facility had been known as the Outlaws Training Camp.
And Miami team, those are all the guys that they just didn't have enough room for in the jail, so they let them go to Miami to play football.
We had a cocky group, and I think because of the players that we had recruited, a lot of them were street kids. We had a lot of success, we won a lot of games, and so our guys had that kind of a feeling that we're going to go ahead and dominate the game.
We thought they were a bunch of jerks. I mean, no one really said anything to the press about it, but we just felt like they were trying to show us up in some way, and we didn't like that.
Despite their outlandish behavior, Miami was a dominating team.
It was probably one of the best college football teams of all time. Testaverde was coming off a Heisman Trophy, and they had great wideouts, Michael Irving and those guys. And I think that maybe they were out to prove that maybe they were the best, and they weren't in the game to beat us. They were in the game to win big.
The moment is at hand. The national championship rests in the balance.
Well, our game plan was that we were going to throw as many different things at Testaverde as we could. We had 150 different looks. During a normal game, you would have anywhere from 25 to 50.
Opening moments of the second quarter. Testaverde, all the time in the world. And goes deep to Brand. It's intercepted. As time slips a bit, throws. It's intercepted by Cobb. Testaverde to throw. It is intercepted by Gutopoulos.
All we needed was for the offense not to either turn the ball over or to get us a small lead. They got us a small lead, and we'd be able to hold it.
After taking a 3-point fourth quarter lead, Testaverde was intercepted for the fourth time in the game.
Intercepted. Conlon to the 5.
2 plays later, with just 3:34 left in the game, tailback DJ Dozier ran it in from the 6 to give Penn State a 14-10 lead. But the cocky bunch from Miami was not done. Deep in their territory, the Hurricanes faced a 4th and 6 with 2:24 left.
You go for it here, Charlie. The whole game is on the line right here. If you miss it, it's over.
Here it is for the title. It's there, first down to Brian Blades. Blades down the sideline, all the way to the Penn State 41-yard line.
When they made that play, I thought we were in trouble. And we were tired. We had been on the field defensively a long time. And I didn't know whether I doubted us at that point in time.
Testaverde, Irvin at the 10.
Testaverde completed his next 5 passes. The battle was Miami's to win. It looked like another good effort, but another tough loss for Joe Paterno.
When they got down near the goal line, there was a timeout. Trey Bauer, the inside linebacker, came over to the sideline and he walked up to me and I looked at him and I said, "It's rough out there, isn't it?" I said, "Good luck." And this was it. I mean, this was everything that those young men had to live for.
4th down, national championship. Intercepted, Giftopoulos.
We won a game really we had no business winning, talent-wise. That was a very rewarding thing, and to understand that, hey, it's not always the guy that has the most talent that wins these things.
The Penn State Nittany Lions are the national champions.
In dramatic fashion, Joe Paterno had won his 2nd national championship. He had overcome decades of bowl game controversies and near-miss national championships.
It was a very, very significant win for us, but I really feel as if it all started with a miscalculation as to how good we were.
In 1901, a Pasadena, California civic group agreed to stage an East-West football game as part of its regular New Year's Day festivities. It took place without most of the nation even knowing about it.
Well, there was a tournament of roses in Pasadena, and it was more or less to show off flowers and floats and things like that. And they decided, why don't we schedule a football game? So the most powerful team in the country then was Michigan, coached by Fielding H. Yost. He was known as Hurry Up Yost, and his team was called the Point-A-Minute Wolverines because they averaged a point a minute.
The opposition for mighty Michigan was Stanford University, who had the most established football program on the West Coast. The Pacific game lagged behind other regions, and Stanford's victory prospects against the Easterners were dismal at best.
Coming into the game, Stanford fans felt it would be a moral victory if they scored even a point. After all, Yost's Michigan team outscored their opponents 501-0 in the regular season.
In the middle of the 3rd quarter, it's 49-0, and Stanford is strictly outmatched. I mean, there's nothing they can do to stem the tide of the point-a-minute Wolverines. So the Stanford captain went up to the Michigan captain and said, "If you don't mind, sir, we've had enough." And the first Rose Bowl ended in the 3rd quarter.
The following year, tournament officials decided to go back to polo matches and Roman chariot races as their main source of entertainment. The Tournament of Roses waited for the West to catch up to the East in the game of football. On the 20th anniversary of the inaugural Rose Bowl game blowout, tiny Washington and Jefferson College in Pennsylvania would be called upon to attempt the unthinkable, to beat California.
California was so good
Nobody wanted to go out and play him. California was a powerhouse. Beating Ohio State in the Rose Bowl previously, something like 28-0, destroyed them.
The contest was supposed to be another chance to showcase how far West Coast football had evolved.
Washington and Jefferson was held in such contempt by the West Coast press that they were calling them things like Willie and Joe or Willie and Jake.
They said it was like bringing the lamb to the slaughter. They said, all we really know about Washington and Jefferson, they're both dead.
With a limited budget and little hope, the Washington and Jefferson presidents traveled from Pennsylvania with only the minimum number of players to Pasadena.
We only had 11 guys play that game. That's a record that will never be touched.
Those 11 players shocked the heavily favored California team, holding them to just 2 first downs and 49 yards in total offense. The game ended in a scoreless tie.
It epitomized college football that 11 guys could rise to this occasion and overcome it, arguably the best team in the country.
After a stunning result in 1922, the Rose Bowl's prominence increased. But the contest 3 years later transformed the Rose Bowl from a novelty to a major American sporting event. On New Year's Day, 1925, Notre Dame was set to make the journey to Pasadena to take on Stanford University.
The circumstances were just classic. 2 of the greatest coaches of all time, Knute Rockne at Notre Dame, Pop Warner at Stanford. On the field, Ernie Nevers, the great All-American, who had a wonderful career at Stanford, versus the 4 horsemen of Notre Dame. The situation just couldn't have been better.
The Rose Bowl at that time sat just a little over 60,000 seats. According to reports of that day, they could have sold well over 100,000 tickets. Every important newspaper writer from the East Coast and Midwest had descended upon that game out there.
Stanford would come into the game with one huge disadvantage. Ernie Nevers had broken both of his ankles over the course of the regular season, and the cast had been removed just 10 days before the game.
Pop Warner rigs up a rather unique brace for him to be able to play using metal in his shoe and then bicycle tires strapped to his leg. He ends up carries the ball 34 times for 114 yards.
Ernie Nevers was unbelievable. I mean, Stanford outplayed him, but Notre Dame found a way to win.
In front of a sellout crowd and a national press, Notre Dame would upset the local favorite 27-10.
People truly began to talk about bowl games after that 1925 Rose Bowl. The press coverage was unprecedented, and the game actually lived up to all the hype.
Rockne and his Notre Dame team had won their first national championship, and the football game at the Tournament of Roses firmly established itself as one of America's premier sporting events. In September 1979, the University of Southern California was defending national champions and launched a promising season in Lubbock, Texas against Texas Tech. The Trojans were loaded and featured a backfield populated by 2 future Heisman Trophy winners.
He had some special players. And Marcus Allen at fullback, he was blocking for Charles White on student body right, student body left. You look at the offensive line that we had, phenomenal.
That group featured 4 All-Americans. But it was Anthony Munoz who excited NFL scouts. 3 plays into the opening game, Munoz's season forever changed.
I laid there on the turf, and I'm, it's like, here's my senior year, my last hurrah, and it's, not even a quarter into the game, and I'm laying there on the turf in Lubbock, Texas, and sure enough, I had to go through my 3rd knee operation in 4 years.
Despite the absence of Munoz on the offensive line, USC went through the season unbeaten and was ranked 3rd in the country going into their Rose Bowl matchup with top-ranked Ohio State.
I decided to go to USC to battle for a national championship, which we had won, to play, UCLA, Notre Dame, and to play in the Rose Bowl. This was my senior year. We had played in 2 Rose Bowls prior to that. I hadn't played because of knee operation. I'm going to do whatever I can to play in that game January 1st.
In December, Munoz was on the mend. Now the Trojans had a decision to make.
And he came into my office and said, should I play and then go into the NFL because he would have used his last year of eligibility, or should I stay and come back next year?
I didn't know what was going to happen on the next level because that was my third knee operation.
He was not going to play, but somehow just willed himself in the rehab and came back.
Pasadena, California, the famed granddaddy, the landmark here in Pasadena.
With 106,000 jammed into the Rose Bowl, Munoz took the field with his USC teammates.
It's almost like a dream. They announced my number, and it hadn't been announced since that first week in September.
Although sidelined all year, keep an eye out for number 77. He starts today.
Coach Robinson allowed me to go out for the coin toss with the captains. I was so high because I was able to play in that game. It's almost like it was blank.
The Ohio State Buckeyes, unbeaten, untied, against the undefeated, once-tied USC Trojans.
USC jumped out to a 10-point lead in the second quarter.
Good protection, and going long for Kevin Williams. Touchdown!
Ohio State, led by flashy sophomore quarterback Art Schleister, battled back.
Schleister going long. Williams open, 25-20, 15-10, touchdown! Oh, my!
With the Buckeyes leading 16-10 in the fourth quarter, the Trojans would have one last chance. With just over 5 minutes remaining, the Trojans were 83 yards away.
Our two teams have done an incredible job of living up to everything that was expected of them, and it all comes down to this.
I can remember making the statement, we are going to take the ball and give it to Charlie White behind Anthony Munoz.
The ball at the 17-yard line. McDonald hands to White. Nice hole. Spins away from a tackler. He's up across the 35, 40, 45, down near midfield.
You couldn't have asked for a better script to the finale of this game.
We really decided that what we did best was run the ball, and that was giving it to Charlie.
First down at the 49 of USC. It's White again. 45, 40, 35, 30. He's all the way to the 22. Charles White is over the 200-yard mark today.
In the last 4 minutes, we ran the ball, Charlie White behind Anthony Munoz, just play after play. And Charlie White had a broken nose and there was blood coming down. I mean, it was very dramatic.
Charles White plows inside the 5 to the 4 and maybe the 3.
It was so businesslike. I mean, the training we had, the whole mentality was just like, hey, come on, we got to do it again. Let's get in the huddle, and not a whole lot had to be said.
Trojans started this drive on their own 17-yard line. They're down to the Buckeye 3. Third down, Allen the outback. White the tailback in the I formation. The snap, pitch to White, starts right. He's at the 5. He's hit, spins close. He's down at the 1.
The game had come down to one final play and one more push for the duo of White and Munoz.
We drove the ball down the field and made plays when we had to, and then got down near the goal line, and it was textbook SC.
A touchdown to tie, an extra point would give SC the lead. 1:38 left. Clock is running. White, touchdown!
Despite his aching knee, Munoz cleared the way for Charles White on that last drive. White gained 71 of USC's 83 yards on that workmanlike march.
The excitement and the celebration that I had was probably even more than what a lot of the guys had, because all these guys had played in 2 other ones. And this was my first one, the first experience I had of being an active member of the team and winning a Rose Bowl.